Hi friends, to kick off the new year, I'm bringing you another mini episode. Consider this a cheat sheet because I'll be sharing 5 of my favorite lessons from my first 5 guests. Try saying that 5 times fast. When I started the NYT journey, my overarching goal was to learn from those around me. I wanted to talk to other transplants who had been in my shoes and were perhaps further down the road than I am. It's only been 5 episodes, but this podcast has filled my bucket time and time again. I've been consistently reminded of the power of shared experiences and both surprised and blown away by how many transplant stories resonate with people who haven't moved away from their home city or country. Life transitions in any form are deeply universal. Distilling these conversations into just 5 key lessons was not easy. So if you like what you hear in this mini episode, I encourage you to dive into the full-length episodes because there are so many more gems to uncover. So without further ado, let's get rooted. The first lesson I've learned is this: society has a community problem. It's not just a transplant concern. In 2023, the US Surgeon General released a report titled Our Epidemic of Loneliness and Isolation. While the report focused on the US, the findings reflect research that's been conducted in Asian, European, and South American countries. Human beings are biologically wired for social connection, but for the past 50 years, our physical connections and the trust we have for our fellow neighbors has been diminishing. Recent stats are pretty sobering. Half of US adults report feeling lonely, with some of the highest rates among young adults. Loneliness and isolation are now more widespread than major health issues, including smoking, cardiovascular, and neurological disorders. Between 2003 and 2020, time spent alone rose by 24 hours per month, while in-person socializing dropped by 20 hours. The sharpest decline was among 15 to 24-year-olds who now spend, believe this, 70% less time with friends. A big factor is technology. Self-checkouts, food delivery, remote work, and endless online entertainment mean we can go about our lives with minimal human interaction. And then there's social media. There are so many great things about it. It helps long-distance connections be maintained. We can create niche communities. But in many ways, it's created silos and polarization. The truth is, online interactions rarely have the depth or mutual respect and investment that real communities need. Add in the pressure of performative connection, where likes and comments replace meaningful conversations, it's easy to feel even more isolated. It doesn't help that many traditional third places, for example, community centres, parks and libraries, have seen disinvestment or have become privatised, making them expensive and inaccessible. So what does that mean for us transplants? First, it means recognising that the challenge of community building isn't just a personal struggle, it's a societal one. This awareness can take off some of the pressure. It's not that you're failing to connect, it's that the systems around us have made it harder. But here's the good news. We have some agency. We can counteract these societal trends by being intentional. Show up in spaces where genuine connection is possible. Lean into vulnerability and prioritize quality over quantity. A great example is my spin studio. I know, I bring it up a lot. But for the past 2.5 years, I've consistently shown up to weekly sessions with the same instructors. About a year ago, I made it a point to introduce myself to the instructors and front desk staff. And yeah, at first it felt awkward and I didn't really know what the end goal was other than hoping someone would know my name. More recently, I started attending studio-hosted events to connect beyond the workout itself. Over time, consistency and effort have turned into something meaningful. I'm now recognized and welcomed as part of the community. It's a familiar place where I know what to expect, where I can let my guard down and be myself. So the takeaway: show up regularly, engage actively, and take advantage of opportunities to connect beyond the main activity. Building community does take intention, but the rewards, such as being seen, known, and valued, are worth it. In nearly every episode of this podcast, loneliness was a recurring theme, whether I addressed it directly or it was naturally woven into the conversation. This brings me to lesson number 2. Loneliness is a signal, not a verdict. Loneliness often carries stigma. We see it as something shameful, a reflection of a personal failure, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Social connectedness changes over time. It's shaped by life transitions and external circumstances. And loneliness isn't just emotional. It's physical and has physical consequences. Chronic loneliness can be as harmful as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Loneliness and social isolation increase the risk of premature death by 26 and 29% respectively. They're linked to anxiety, depression, dementia, heart disease, and stroke. So why does loneliness affect us so deeply? It goes back to our biological wiring. From our caveman ancestors to modern life, humans have always relied on connection for survival. The stakes are high. Loneliness is linked to lower life expectancy and poor health outcomes, showing just how vital meaningful relationships are to our health and our well-being. For transplants, these challenges are heightened because we've left behind familiar support systems and we're trying to build new ones. Loneliness is more than an uncomfortable feeling. It's a survival instinct, hardwired into us to ensure we seek connection. Just like hunger signals that we need food, loneliness signals that we need relationships. It's not a verdict that something is inherently wrong with us. It's a natural response urging you to reconnect and protect your well-being. Think of loneliness as an emotional alarm system. It's asking you to reflect on, are you giving enough time and energy to the relationships that matter the most to you? Are you showing up as your authentic self and in your interactions, or are you holding back? And are you creating space for new connections, even if it feels uncomfortable at first? Viewing loneliness as a signal shifts it from something to be ashamed of to an opportunity for self-awareness and growth. It's a reminder that what you're truly craving is connection and that you have the power to take steps forward to change that. And that's what you're doing by listening to this episode of New York Transplants, where we're all about creating spaces for stories, reflections, and connections. The third lesson my guests have taught me is this: vulnerability creates visibility. I'm going to say that again because this is my favorite lesson. Vulnerability creates visibility. We often, and I certainly do, take ourselves too seriously when it comes to putting ourselves out there. We're afraid of being judged or making the wrong impression, so we retreat behind a polished exterior. That's not to say that letting down our guard and being vulnerable is easy or even necessary with everyone that we meet. Vulnerability can be exhausting, especially when you're navigating new environments. And it's perfectly okay to have different levels of vulnerability with different people. But keep this in mind, vulnerability is the key to connection. Think of your vulnerability like choosing which level of makeup coverage you're going to wear. Stay with me on this. At first, you might choose full coverage when you're meeting people. Foundation, concealer, eyeshadow, even setting spray. Just like armor can help you feel ready to face the world, keeping your guard up allows you to present a version of yourself that feels safe, even if you're feeling uncertain underneath. As you grow more comfortable and confident, you might switch to medium coverage, a bit of foundation and mascara. It's less effort and it's reflecting a willingness to share more of yourself while still maintaining some armor and boundaries. Eventually, you might feel confident to go barefaced or just use a tinted moisturizer. Minimal effort, you're showing up as your authentic self, feeling secure to let your true self be seen. Each level of coverage represents which version of yourself you're ready to reveal. And there's no right timeline for peeling back those layers or putting on that makeup. Let me give a personal example. A couple of weeks ago, I got some bad news about a family member right before heading into an event where I was the only new person. Everyone else there had known each other for 10 plus years. And all I wanted to do was stay at home or at least be around my people, around my friends who I could be barefaced in front of. I had to balance this desire to be with familiar faces with my desire to make deeper connections here in New York. So I mustered the energy and put on my full coverage makeup. my armor. Because who knows, this group of people may one day become the very people I can be barefaced with, but I need to put in the work and I need to take that risk. Vulnerability is a process. It's not an instant transformation. Yes, the ultimate goal is to find friendships where you can show up confidently barefaced just as you are. But before that can happen, you have to test the waters. It's about gradually building trust and discovering what feels safe and authentic in each interaction. Vulnerability grows in layers, much like peeling back your makeup coverage over time. Here's the thing. Sometimes you will overshare. We've all been there, and you'll feel exposed. Other times you'll hold back and wish you hadn't. But every interaction teaches you something about navigating that balance. And with time, you'll find friendships where you feel safe enough to drop the armor entirely and show up as your unguarded, authentic self. Remember this, vulnerability is practice. Start small, be patient with yourself, and remember that connection grows when you let yourself be seen. The fourth lesson I've learned from my journey and from my guests is this: routine turns strangers into friends. When you first move to a new city, the excitement is undeniable. Everything feels new. The sights, the people, the endless opportunities. But that initial thrill can quickly shift to feelings of overwhelm as you try to navigate everything your new city has to offer. And in today's social media driven world, the temptation to chase the next best thing is everywhere. You'll find yourself bookmarking every new cafe, wine bar, and pop-up event on Instagram, filling your weekends with plans to explore it all. It's exciting, sure, but constantly hopping from one place to the next can leave you feeling disconnected, like a perpetual tourist in your own life. Here's the lesson that I wish I'd learned earlier. Community isn't built by chasing trends. It's built by embracing routine. Routine isn't flashy, and it might not look great in a highlight reel, but it's the secret ingredient for turning strangers into friends. Why? Because consistency creates familiarity, and familiarity creates connection. Start small. If you find a cafe, fitness class, or bookstore you love, don't let it be a one-time discovery. Go back, then go back again. Repetition turns these places from unfamiliar spots into familiar havens. Over time, you'll find yourself greeted with a smile, a nod, or maybe even your name, a simple but powerful sign that you belong. Be intentional with your interactions, whether it's chatting with a barista, striking up a conversation with a fitness instructor, or saying hello to your neighbor. Take the extra step to introduce yourself. You'll be surprised by how often people are happy to share their recommendations or stories, especially when they know that you're new. These small moments of connection often snowball into deeper relationships. The spin class again. Expand your routine to explore beyond the usual. Dive into neighborhoods or events that aren't on the must-visit lists. Attend a local festival, volunteer at a community event, or visit a lesser-known museum or library. These experiences not only help you to connect with people, but also immerse you into the authentic fabric of your city, the parts that make it unique and yours. Finally, remember this, that connection takes time. It's natural to feel impatient when friendships or a sense of belonging don't form instantly, but relationships like routines grow stronger with consistent effort. Show up, engage, allow time to work its magic. Trends might grab your attention for a moment, but the bonds you build through routine will last. This brings me to the fifth and final lesson, and perhaps the most frustrating one. It takes time. Building a true sense of community isn't instant. It requires patience, persistence, and an understanding of the journey ahead. One of the hardest parts of being a transplant is adjusting your expectations. It's tempting to compare your life in a new city to the one you left behind, especially when it comes to relationships. But the reality is, in your hometown, you likely had years, maybe even decades, to build those connections. Familiarity, proximity, and shared history worked in your favor. In a new city, especially one as fast-paced and as transient as New York, it's easy to feel like time is slipping away. Even after a few years, you might wonder, why are my relationships not as deep as the ones you left behind? But building meaningful connections take time, and in cities like this, it often takes longer. The transient nature of urban life means some connections will come and go, but the ones that last, they're the rewarding ones. The key is to give yourself grace. Instead of rushing to recreate what you once had, focus on planting seeds. Each conversation, each interaction, and each new face is part of that process. Over time, those seeds will grow into the deeper connections you're craving. Patience is difficult, especially when you're craving immediate belonging, but reminding yourself that meaningful relationships take time and can help you keep moving forward. So thank you for helping me stay grounded and rooted in New York.